Despite losing 5 of their last 6 games, Mike Macdonald still has confidence the Seahawks can bounce back in the second half and get back in the NFC West race. How can they get it done? Rob Rang and I are going to be devising a blueprint for a second half rebound coming up next year on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, here on our Tuesday episode. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in Broncos country, not Denver, but Boise, Idaho, or you are listening in Peoria, Illinois. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks ramping up preparation starting tomorrow. They had today off, but they're going to be gearing up for the 49ers. Mike Macdonald continues to be bullish on his team's chances of rebounding coming out of the bye and getting back into the race. How can they get it done? We're going to dish out our blueprint for second half success for Mike Macdonald's team. We've got a Tuesday mailbag, and we're going to take a look at what's new with the 49ers. Believe it or not, there's quite a bit that's changed since the first time these teams met back in week 6. All this is brought your way courtesy of our friends at Ultimate GM. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's well documented that it's been a struggle for the Seahawks since the calendar flipped to October. They've lost 5 of their last 6 games. But coming out of their bye week, Mike Macdonald continues to be confident in his team's ability to be able to turn things around, right the ship, and get back into the playoff hunt in the NFC West. Rob, obviously, when you lose 5 out of 6, things are not going well. There's a lot of things that have been to blame for the Seahawks' current slump that they're mired in. But looking towards the final 8 games, the Seahawks have the 5th hardest strength of schedule. So it's not going to be easy for them to rebound from that sense. But it's time for you and I to put on our thinking caps, maybe our teaching caps to an extent here, and try to devise a blueprint for this team to be able to get hot in the second half and be able to play back into the division race the way that Mike Macdonald believes they can. And I know for you, there's just one statement that's kind of an all-encompassing cure-all that you think would help this team be able to get back to their winning ways.
Yeah, Corbin, I don't think it's that complicated. I think that you can get very specific and try to point out different ways the Seahawks might be able to win. Really what comes down to for me, is to get healthy, get simplified, both on the offense and defensive side of the ball, and then basically get angry. I mean, there are not a lot of Seahawks on this current roster who have beaten the San Francisco 49ers. So I think that is one of the things is they have to develop a little bit of internal leadership and get pissed, frankly, to decide that they want to beat the bullies on the block, so to speak. So I'm going to start off with the get healthy. I mean, certainly there's no question about it. You got to get Abraham Lucas back onto the field. It does sound like that is going to be the case. It sounds like DK Metcalf is also going to be back onto the field for the Seahawks. That is huge. Those 2 players getting back onto the field would be absolutely critical for Seattle's success this week against the San Francisco 49ers. I don't have the confidence that Uchenna Nwosu is going to be back, but I think if Seattle is going to be able to make any type of a postseason run, they have to get Uchenna Nwosu back on the field healthy and, again, playing the physical, angry football that he provides. And I would throw in Trey Brown in there as well. I know that he is a little bit has struggled a little bit so far this season. There's been a lot of fans who have been critical of him, but I'm going to mention him primarily in another segment a little bit later today as a reason why I think that it is critical that Seattle brings back Trey Brown and he is healthy and ready to create some of the big turnovers that he has done in the past. So to me, those are the biggest things here. As far as getting simplified, rather than belabor the point, I really think that this comes down to the offensive line. I've been evaluating prospects for an awful long time, 23 years to be exact. And I can tell you that Laken Tomlinson at the left guard position has been a very good football player for an awful long time. Anthony Bradford has been a good football player for quite a number of years. Connor Williams at center has been a very good football player. all three of them are playing terrible football for the Seahawks at this point. And I believe that some of that, at least some of that, has to go with the fact that I think that the Seattle is basically just making things so complicated. So many times they are looking back towards the sideline before they're actually snapping the football. I think that they're thinking rather than reacting. And that to me is a recipe for disaster. And finally, the whole idea of getting angry. Corbin, there are four players. If you're not going to count the specialist, Jason Myers at kicker and Michael Dixon at punter, there are 4 players on Seattle's roster at this point. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jaron Reed, and the aforementioned Trey Brown, who have ever beat the San Francisco 49ers as a member of the Seattle Seahawks. So if they're going to get angry, then one of those 4 players would seem like the most likely candidate to be able to kind of pull one of those players only means. Geno Smith's 0-6. Russell Wilson, by comparison, it's not fair to compare this, but still, Russell Wilson was 16-4. Geno Smith is 0-6. You need somebody, the players, not the coaches, not the general manager, not the team owner. You need somebody of the players to get angry and say, you know what, big boys on the block, we're going to kind of take back over in the NFC West division.
Yeah, you make some really good points here that it's more about mindset right now with this football team than it is necessarily the X's and O's, although decomplicating things a little bit, simplifying it for these players. I think that we've already seen that start to happen some on defense. I think the offense can follow suit a little bit in terms of making things a little bit easier to get the play ready to go for pre-snap and not have your guys looking over to the sideline constantly like you see with a college offense. It just seems like that is slowing them down. Like you said, you're thinking, not reacting. And in the NFL, where there's such a thin margin for error, that's a huge deal. With that being said, I want to dive into a couple specifics with this because I think that there are 2 things that this football team needs to do, one on offense, one on defense, that I think would go a long ways towards helping the problems that this team has on both sides of the ball. You want to help your offensive line out, Lake and Tomlinson and company. You want to help them up front get more under center plays. Just in general, it is not easy in the NFL to run 80% shotgun and have success against NFL defenders. You need to have the illusions that come with under center. I'm just being frank with you. When you're under center, it's so much easier to be able to disguise your run game and not give things away. When you're in shotgun, it's really hard to run the football. And look, Connor Williams, the snap issues, you want to address that? Don't have him snapping shotgun as much and have the under center. And oh, by the way, under center play action is where it's at. And Geno Smith last year was one of the very best in the NFL. That 2 years ago he was. This team has very rarely ran play action. Some of it's been because they haven't been able to run the football. But again, I think the run game can get going with more under center concepts rather than living and dying in shotgun. And so on offense, I think that you can remedy a lot of the things that are hurting this football team and just kind of say, look, offensive line, we're going to let you guys shoot out of the stance. We're going to let you play physical football. Just get downhill. We're going to be under center, and we're going to run some concepts that we haven't been able to successfully run to this point, mostly out of shotgun and pistol. We are going to run them from under center. And then I think on the defensive side of the football, go exotic. And it's kind of counterintuitive when you're talking about simplifying things, but you can still simplify things on defense and be aggressive. I think one of the issues that the Seahawks have had, and I think it was Leonard Williams who was talking about this a couple weeks ago, they would have 3 plays before the snap. And you basically have all that communication going on. From that standpoint, I'd like to see this team simplify things a little bit. And I think you're already seeing that in the Rams game, and they were playing faster as a result. But you got to take advantage of some of the players you have in the personnel. I just feel like Devin Witherspoon, one of the reasons that he has not been as impactful this year, I don't feel like Mike McDonald has fully embraced what he can be in terms of utilizing him as a blitzer, mixing and matching those sim pressures, the blitzes. They need to unleash Devin Witherspoon. I don't feel like they have done that to this point, and I think that that can remedy some of the other issues that they've had on defense. He can be like having an extra linebacker in the field with his physicality. Let him play to those strengths, and then you're going to have Josh Jobe or Trey Brown and Reek Woolen at the other outside cornerback spot. And I think you can mix in some linebacker blitzes with the players they have. As you mentioned yesterday, Tyrese Knight, I think, is a better blitzer than what Tyrell Dodson was. sim pressures, whatever it's going to be. I want to see more creativity from that standpoint. That doesn't mean you have to make things complicated. You don't have to have 3 calls at the beginning of a play, but I want to see more creativity from this defense to take advantage of some of the special players that they have, most notably Devin Witherspoon. I think if you saw these things happen, physicality, more angry, the simplified, faster, healthier football team, I think that you would see a difference in the results in the win-loss column. So to me, those are 2 big things on offense and defense this team has got to do starting in this game against the 49ers. If you can't run the football and you can't play under center on offense, it's going to be tough sledding at Levis Stadium. Shotgun all game long, you're just making it easy for Nick Bosa to go back there and hit Geno Smith. Defensively, you got to find some ways to mix and match how you're attacking Brock Purdy and get him caught off guard, because that's challenging to do. But this, to me, is key for the Seahawks team to be able to move forward and get more wins in the second half of their schedule. When we come back, we didn't get a mailbag on Monday. We're going to be tackling your questions today, NFL, college, you name it. We'll get to that coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Hey, Seahawks fans, remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM? Well, they're back and at it. They've added another amazing new game mode that I need to tell you about. The game has you now step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory. And they've added a head coach career mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, hiring coaching staff, now you get to call offensive plays during games as well. Additionally, you'll dig the new tools you can work with, such as individual training camps and upgraded negotiation systems. This creates an even more fun and realistic game. If you already have it installed, be sure to do an update so you can try out the new mode. If you don't have it yet, download it right now. It's a must for all football fans. I love it, and I know you will too. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer for our Locked On fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you need in creating your dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com. That's ultimate-gm.com, or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Get ready to tackle the NFL action here at the midway point of the 2024 season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Christian McCaffrey scoring a rushing touchdown against the Seahawks on Sunday, or DK Metcalf being the first player in Sunday's game at Levi Stadium to have a 30-plus yard reception. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Meringue. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there that are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, don't forget to check out the new and improved Locked On NFL. It's now twice a day. Get your morning shot of NFL Espresso with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, and then our good friend, Locked On Jaguars host Tony Wiggins, hosting the second episode. Get all your insight, analysis, insider intel that you're not going to get anywhere else. Locked On NFL, it's on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Normally, we do a mailbag on Monday. With this being a post-bye week, though, we've switched the schedule up a little bit, but that doesn't mean we forgot about you, our valued listeners. It's time to tackle our Monday mailbag on a Tuesday. Going to get as many questions in as we can here. And our first one, Rob, this one is coming off of Threads, and I found this very interesting here. This one is for you, Rob. Rob, you have been an advocate for playing Drake Thomas at the linebacker position. Why are you more bullish on playing him than Tyrese Knight at this point in the wake of the release of Tyrell Dodson?
For the same reason that I graded Lofa higher than most of the other linebackers of that class years ago, because sometimes it's just about instincts. I've used the expression, and Corbin, you'll appreciate this, Jedi-like instincts. This is a guy that can close his eyes and locate the football just because there is so much awareness of what is going on around him. Drake Thomas has that. He is short. He is slow. He's not particularly athletic. He just locates the damn football. And that's what football is all about, especially if you're playing a highly physical inside linebacker position, the way that Drake Thomas does and Mike McDonald's defense. I really think that Drake Thomas, he doesn't have the highest upside of the linebackers on Seattle's roster. To me, he has the the highest floor. He is the safest of Seattle's linebackers. And that's not just my opinion. That is conversations I've had with Seattle scouts, Seattle's coaches, going back to the offseason. They felt like they stole him from the Las Vegas Raiders a year ago off of their practice squad. And I really do think that if Drake Thomas gets his opportunity, you will see the tackle numbers blossom. You will see more plays at the line of scrimmage or a yard or two, in advance of that, but not the 10, 12, 15, 25-yard runs that we have seen, unfortunately, victimize the Seahawks defense here in recent weeks and throughout the entire 2024 season.
Our next question here, and this is coming from Nabil Bakishi. With the current talent pool for offensive linemen, why don't more teams decide to turn college tackles into NFL guards? If I'm Seattle, I give George Fant, Jason Peters, even Mike Jarrell a competitive chance at right guard. That's a really good question because there is such a dearth in offensive linemen. And if you're athletic enough to play tackle, you would think you could handle playing in a phone booth inside. But it's not as easy to make that transition as I think some fans think. There's a lot of different components inside. And oh, by the way, you're dealing with different types of defenders. You're not blocking those really athletic edge guys. You're dealing with 315-pound behemoths that also are super athletic in the middle, particularly in the NFC West. So this is not necessarily an easy transition for guys to make. A player like George Fant, who has been playing tackle his entire NFL career, and he's now into his 30s. Not saying it's impossible that he could handle that, but that would be a difficult transition. Jason Peters actually played some guard for the Seahawks last year. So that could be an option if Seattle wanted to go that route. And he is such a freak athlete, even at 42 years old. He's still an upper echelon athlete for an offensive lineman, former converted tight end coming out of Arkansas. So he can handle that. But Mike Jarrell, I think that's putting way too much on the rookie's plate to ask him to move inside and play guard right now when he's still trying to get his head above the water, playing tackle against NFL competition. Not to say that this is not a strategy that teams couldn't employ more. I just think that it's not as easy as some fans think for a tackle to just slide inside and be a quality guard going against NFL defensive tackles. Our next question here for Rob from David Carter. Does having a GM that expressed guards are overdrafted and overpaid mean our offensive line issues start with management? This is kind of building off the discussion we had yesterday.
I think it's a fair question. I mean, that's one of the things that, John Schneider, I've kind of locked horns, so to speak, over the years about this. I really think that it goes back to his time with the Green Bay Packers, where they were able, because, in my opinion, because they had elite players at the quarterback position, they were able basically to just kind of, eschew interior offensive linemen. Their centers, the guards that they were selecting and having success with, were late round picks or undrafted free agents. I don't know that that's the case here with the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, Geno Smith and his, resurrection, so to speak, speaks for itself. But Russell Wilson is a quarterback in the past, of course, in Seattle, that was a guy that kind of needed a little bit of protection up front. Otherwise, he simply wasn't able to see over the top. I think that this has been an issue for Seattle for an awful long time. To me, it is one of the dark marks on John Schneider's resume here in Seattle. I do think that in today's modern football, look, it's not that complicated. The closest way to the quarterback is straight up field. And so if you were able to slow down some of the defensive tackles, especially in division like the NFC West, where you had a guy like Aaron Donald, then I think that it's critical that you would protect up front. I think that you've seen John Schneider adapt to that. I think that's why they made the trade for Connor Williams. I think that's why he spent some money here with Laken Tomlinson. It's the fact that Seattle has not been successful in that regard is not necessarily an indictment on John Schneider, in my opinion. It's an indictment on either the quarterback or the offensive play caller, in my opinion. But again, the ultimate point that the question is that I do think that Seattle needs to invest more time, more dollars, more scouting, frankly, to the interior of the offensive line. If they do not, I think that they are going to continue to struggle getting any kind of push in the running game and certainly protecting the quarterback from the interior outside.
Next question here from Mike C. from NJ. Do you think the Seahawks are stuck in NFL purgatory and the sooner they embrace a rebuild, the better? No, I don't think they are in purgatory. I mean, this is a team 2 years ago that made the playoffs. They just missed last year. And it feels like if they can just stop the self-inflicted wounds, that maybe, just maybe, they can get back into the hunt this year. This is the problem with the idea of tanking. And I think the Seahawks have done some things that rebuilding teams do. They have made investments in higher picks in the draft. They traded away their franchise quarterback a couple of years ago. I mean, they have done some things that are part of a rebuilding process without completely tearing down to the studs. The issue with the NFL is if you look at track records for teams that tear down to the studs, what is the success rate? I mean, it is extremely low. To just completely rip apart your team and then try to reconstruct it, that does not work more times than not. So the idea of tanking, there's a reason why you see teams typically that have 2 or 3 wins at the end of the year. They're still playing hard. I mean, those guys want to earn themselves a roster spot somewhere the next year. But there's also the mindset that, teams just don't tank in the NFL. And the reason why is because there's not a success rate there. And you look at this year's class in particular, where's the quarterback that you can just draft at number 1, number 2 overall that you can just plug in that's going to win a lot of games for you immediately? I don't know that there's a QB in this class that's going to be able to fill that void. It is not a strong QB class compared to the last couple that we've seen. So that doesn't mean there isn't a guy up there that couldn't develop into that kind of a player, but it is really risky to say we're going to tear everything down to the basement and we're just going to rebuild completely. There's no guarantee that that's going to work. And most of the time, unfortunately, it doesn't. So you have to be creative, keeping your good players and finding ways to improve your roster so you can contend. You want to win as many games as you can. And that's been the Seahawks mindset. Last question that we have here, this one going for Rob, and this building off the offensive line coming from Davis Miller. Do you believe Charles Cross has shown enough on tape to be our long-term franchise left tackle? What would you consider the odds of him getting an extension this coming off season?
I think I'd talk about 50-50 at this point. Look, as you just said, Corbin, and I 100% agree with you. This is not a 2025 draft class that is particularly talented at the quarterback position. Frankly, I don't think it's particularly talented at any position. This is one of the weaker draft classes that I have seen. And so I do think that helps Charles Cross, who has made some strides as a run blocker, continues to be an above average pass protector. I don't think that he's an all-pro player. And frankly, I think that's what Seattle was expecting when they made that selection, whether it was at number 6 overall a couple of years ago. Look, he's a good player. I don't know that he's a great player, but he has been a very durable player. He has been somebody that can rely on and off of the field. I think that he is likely to be brought back just because I think that he's a quality player. I just don't think that he's an elite prospect. And I do believe that Mike Macdonald wants to run the football down opponents' throats. Charles Cross is not that guy. He is more of a dancer rather than a punisher at the point of attack. So I think if this is a 50-50 proposition, if Seattle were to let Charles Cross go, I don't know that there's very many offensive tackles in this class that really are going to be much of an upgrade. So to me, this is one of the most fascinating decisions that the Seahawks, presumably John Schneider, general manager, certainly Mike Macdonald, the head coach, have to make over the next couple of months. And whether Charles Cross is going to be their left tackle in the future, it's certainly going to cost an awful lot of money. I just don't know that you are going to get better if you allow the relatively proven commodity that is Charles Cross to walk away.
And he's still a really young player. And it's not like they have to make this deal happen in the offseason. He's only going to be going into his 4th season. And you have the first-round pick, 5th-year option if they want to go that route. Now, that would be a pricey season, but it would give them a little bit more flexibility to make a decision on whether or not they want to extend him. So, like you said, this is kind of like when a team's got a top 15, top 20 quarterback, and they're like, look, we'd like to see if we can get a top 10 quarterback. The problem is when you're rolling the dice like that, especially if you're talking about draft picks, there's no guarantee a draft pick is going to turn into a better player. Same thing with the offensive line, especially when you're talking about a blindside protector and the fact that he has improved. I think if you just put a better line around him, he's going to be much better. Right now, he's kind of like Gilligan, and he's trying to pick up the entire island right now. So yeah. I think that this is still kind of too early to call whether or not they're going to go that route. I think it's too early to say that doing that. It's too early to say, yeah, let's pony up the dough and let's make him our long-term guy. But you don't have to make that decision right now or even this offseason coming up because he still has another year minimum left on his rookie contract. When we come back, the 49ers and Seahawks will duel in Santa Clara, their rematch in Week 11. I know it's only been a few weeks since these teams played, but quite a bit has changed for the 49ers. We're going to take a look at what's new heading into this Week 11 rematch coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping your next car payment when you want to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, comedy, music, and theater near you. They offer killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. You can see your views from your seat on the website and their app. And with their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You want to see the Seahawks on the road in Santa Clara against the 49ers on Sunday? You can still get really good seats right now in the lower bowl for under $100. Great seats, and you can do what other fan bases have been doing at Lumen Field and make life a little tougher on the 49ers at Levis Stadium. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks coming out of their bye, they get a significant challenge right off the bat, Week 11, trying to turn their season around. Look, Rob, this could be the type of game that really could be a season-changing one for the Seahawks. If they can find a way to go to Santa Clara and beat the 49ers at Levis Stadium, they've had a couple times that they have been on the cusp of doing that the last couple of years, and then they've imploded late in the second half. That playoff game a few years ago, they were leading at halftime, and early in the fourth quarter, they were still very close, and things just unraveled from there. So they've been able to compete, but you look at this 49ers team coming into this game, they still don't look right to me. I watched the game against the Buccaneers. This still does not look like the team we've seen. But then you look at all the injuries, there's been some changes. Yes, Christian McCaffrey's back. More on that here in a moment. But Brandon Ayuk, the star receiver, he's out for the year with a torn ACL. He was injured the week after the Seahawks lost to the 49ers at Lumen Field. Javon Hargrave is out. Hufanga, their safety, is still on injured reserve. This is a team that still has a lot of really good players that are not going to be available to suit up in this game, even if Christian McCaffrey is back. So there's some differences here. There's some positives for the 49ers, but there's still a lot of really good players they're not going to have in this football game. And Ayuk being the most notable that won't be playing in this game that did play the first matchup between these teams.
Yeah, and that's a really positive look at it from a Seahawks perspective, Corbin. But I really think that the 49ers are getting stronger, and it's going to be critical for Seattle to go to Santa Clara and shock the 49ers because they are getting healthier. And as you mentioned, Brandon Ayuk being out is a critical loss to that club. But they got their first-round selection, Ricky Pearsall, is a talented football player, caught his first touchdown in the NFL this past week. He, again, is going to be stepping into the big shoes left by Brandon Brandon Ayuk, but still getting Ricky Pearsall, John Feliciano as the offensive guard on the heels of Dominic Pooney being nominated as Rookie of the Week by Pro Football Focus. They get the edge rusher Yetur Gross-Matos, who is coming back. They made a trade for Khalil Davis, a 6'2", 315-pounder. That's exactly the type of size and physicality combination that Seattle has struggled with in the past. And then, oh, by the way, as you mentioned, Christian McCaffrey is coming back. He had 19 touches against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a week ago. Now, of the 19 touches, he only had 13 rushes for 39 yards. Not really very frightening. However, he had 6 catches for 68 yards. Seattle, of course, has, 2 relatively new inside linebackers, so that is troubling. And considering the fact that Seattle gave up, 225 rushing yards to a 49ers team a couple of weeks ago that did not have Christian McCaffrey, I think the 49ers are walking into this home game feeling very confident. This is a 5-4 club, of course. And so, again, when you look at the fact that the Seahawks are 4-5, the 49ers are 5-4, it seems pretty comparable. But consider who the 49ers have lost so far this season. They lost to a 7-2 Minnesota Vikings team. The one team that they've lost to so far that's under 500 was a 4-5 Rams squad that, of course, just beat the Seahawks. They lost to a 6-4 first place Arizona Cardinals team. We'll get into that conversation here in the next couple of weeks. And then, of course, the undefeated 2-time defending Super Bowl champions, or Kansas City Chiefs, and so again, the 49ers are playing better football. Right now, the Seahawks have got to strap up their chin straps and get ready to play. Otherwise, the 49ers feel like they are getting stronger. The Seahawks are going to have to be able to match that if they're going to want to have any kind of success in Santa Clara this weekend.
You mentioned the Christian McCaffrey effect. I don't care what he did in his first game back last week. I don't care if he had less than 40 rushing yards. I look at what he's done in 4 games against the Seahawks since he came over from San Francisco. You look at the stats, 486 rushing yards, 6.4 yards per attempt, 3 rushing touchdowns. Oh, by the way, he's added 14 catches for 80 yards and a receiving touchdown. He has been an absolute nightmare. I mean, speaking of the number 23, he's looked like Michael Jordan out there just dominating the Seahawks defense. So you mentioned the way that the Seahawks played against a McCaffrey-less offense back in week 6 and the rushing yardage, over 220 rushing yards they gave him that game with Jordan Mason as the primary running back. You've got 2 new linebackers. The one advantage here, Ernest Jones has historically played really well against the San Francisco 49ers. And the Rams have a track record of being a team that have given the 49ers trouble. So does that instantly improve your run defense going against McCaffrey? It could. That could be a real difference maker, but you got a rookie now playing next to him in Tyrese Knight. How is Tyrese Knight going to handle dealing with the shake and bake action that is Christian McCaffrey and what he can do out of the backfield as a receiver? And then Ricky Pearsall, as you mentioned, what a story coming back from that gunshot wound that put him on the PUP list early in the season, the non-football injury list, actually. And he was out for the first 7 games and then came back and had his first touchdown in this past game. So the 49ers, they had a first-round pick waiting to replace Brandon Ayuk. That's not saying that Pearsall is as good as Ayuk, at least at this point, but they did have him waiting in the wings ready to go. So it's still a team that's got plenty of weapons. We'll keep an eye on George Kittle, who's got a hamstring injury that he's dealing with. That is a storyline to watch leading up to Sunday's game, obviously, but still a very solid football team. They haven't been quite clicking on all cylinders, but they're missing some pieces. Nonetheless, this is going to be a tough opponent for the Seahawks, especially you have to deal with number 23 in the backfield once again. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you do not miss a single episode. We come back tomorrow. It is the glorious return of Matchup Wednesday. Seahawks 49ers, the matchups to watch in their rematch at Levis Stadium. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thanks for listening. Go Hawks.